In love with my best friend, 23M, I found solace after a toxic situationship. I value our friendship really highly, he said when I doubted everything. Now I'm torn between lingering feelings and wanting to keep him close. How can I let go without losing him? This story may end up being somewhat lengthy and rather disorganized. I will likely delete it soon, but I need assistance. I feel compelled to provide sufficient background information to clarify why I cannot view the situation in strictly black and white terms and to convey my confusion. I am a 29-year-old male in love with my best friend who is 23 years old and male as well. We met at the university, where I am one of the older students in our class. At first, I mistakenly thought he was closer to my age because he was physically larger and had a charming mustache. His serious and reserved demeanor also contributed to that older impression. Our friendship began typically. We had similar classes since we were both in the same program. One day, we discovered that we were neighbors, which led to us hanging out at each other's places weekly. I found him attractive from the start, but I did not consider him in a romantic way then, as I was involved in a situationship with a closeted man at that time. My focus was primarily on that relationship, though I was curious about whether he liked men as well. He was difficult to read and opened up slowly, but certain actions made me question his feelings. For instance, while watching movies, he would lean against me. He once asked me to accompany him to select a perfume, and instead of using paper strips provided by the staff, he sprayed the perfume on his wrist and extended his hand to me, inviting me to smell it to see if I liked it. I did, and he purchased it. The individual I was in a situationship with at the time was also a classmate and a close friend, and we attended all of the first-year student events together. I was always with him, while my friend was with his own group of friends. Occasionally, I sensed a possessive quality from him, though I wondered if it was merely wishful thinking. For example, while I was talking with my situationship, my friend would often leave his group to check on me, asking, "I'm going to the store. Do you need anything?" Or, "I'm going home. Do you want to come with me, or will you come later with him?" He would also say, "Do you want to go to the sauna? I will go if you go too. I do not want to go alone." On one occasion, while I was sitting on a couch with my situationship, whom I will refer to as V from now on, he approached from his group and sat by me. He almost placed his hand behind me but stopped and tucked them in instead. I tried to discern whether he was also attracted to men. He already knew I was gay by posing indirect questions, but he skillfully provided vague responses that avoided my inquiries. For instance, while we were watching a movie, he asked me, "Do you find that actor attractive?" I replied, "Not really my type." "Why do you?" He responded, "I like the Scottish accent. I think it's funny," thereby avoiding my actual question. Now about my situationship with V, which is relevant to this narrative. It was exceedingly toxic. He was manipulative, narcissistic, selfish, a habitual liar, and an all-around awful person. Initially, he claimed to be straight, but upon learning that I was gay, he began flirting with me relentlessly, showering me with the kind of attention a boyfriend might give. One day, he told me he was actually bisexual, and maintained this for about 2 months until he suddenly claimed he was just joking and that he was indeed straight. That relationship was filled with frequent emotional upheaval, causing me constant anxiety. I would go out of my way to spend time with him while he did as he pleased, ultimately realizing he was using me to feed his ego because he enjoyed the attention. The only solution was to cut him out of my life entirely, and by that point I was mentally shattered. I had suicidal thoughts and was extremely distrustful and insecure, which, while not new for me, had certainly worsened because of V. He effectively destroyed whatever sense of self-worth I had remaining. Upon cutting V out of my life, I urgently needed someone to talk to, fearing I would suffocate from my emotions. I texted my friend, "Do you have some time for me? I really need to talk to someone." He promptly replied, "Of course, come over." I went to his place and shared everything, V's emotional abuse, manipulation, and lies. This was the first time my friend understood the true nature of my relationship with V. Prior to this, he believed we were merely very close friends. I recounted how V constantly lied about his sexuality, alternating between claiming to be gay or bisexual and then dismissing it as a joke. As I shared my story, my friend abruptly said, "Screw this, I'm bisexual." I was somewhat taken aback as I had not anticipated him coming out to me. I responded with, "Oh," he continued, "Yeah, but I know you want true love, a real long-term relationship. I'm not at that phase in my life yet, so I need to set a boundary." He fell silent again and told me to continue. I did, and he listened patiently, offering support. He assured me that if I ever needed to talk more, he would always be available, and he was. To this day, I wonder why he chose that moment to come out to me, as it felt like an impulsive decision. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, he listened to me as I cried over V, soothing and comforting me. He repeatedly said, "I'm always here," which ultimately helped me move on from V. Without his support, I genuinely do not know how I would have managed. We took a trip to a neighboring country for a few days, which was a lovely experience. One night, we went to a bar for cocktails. After some conversation and drinks, I began flirting with him. He awkwardly replied, "You are not really my type." It stung naturally. I fell silent for a moment and he asked, "Did I hurt you?" I replied, "No, it's all right." He further explained, "You know, you become friends with someone and think if they wanted to take it further, I would be interested. I just never felt that with you. There was never any spark." I reflected on all the moments where I thought he might have shown interest and wondered if I had misunderstood those signals. To give you some context, he is bisexual but has never had sexual experiences. He kissed a girl once but has done nothing else. He mentioned a childhood male friend he had a crush on back in his home country, but he never made a move on him. He is also not on any dating apps. He shared once that he had insecurities about his attractiveness and was afraid to put his face on dating apps. Despite my difficulty understanding this, as I find him very attractive, he said he was not ready for a long-term relationship at this point in his life and was only interested in a casual sexual relationship. Several people at the university, both men and women, have hit on him over time. However, whenever he realized they were looking for a romantic and long-term connection, he backed off, stating, "I am not a romantic." Despite him telling me I was not his type, I began to realize I was falling for him anyway. His quiet and steady presence provided me with a kind of comfort I had never really experienced before. However, those developing feelings stirred up all the trauma that V had left in me not too long ago. I began feeling paranoid, obsessive, terrified, distrustful, and extremely insecure. Whenever I felt neglected or overlooked by him in any way, which was always unintentional, I curled in on myself, fearing a repeat of my previous experience. Even though my friend never led me on or gave me false hopes like V, I still concocted worst-case scenarios in my mind and drove myself insane. The comfort I initially felt quickly transformed into anxiety, insecurity, and fear. I found myself dissecting every little thing he did, looking for signs that he would abandon me as well. After spiraling into one of my mental breakdowns, I realized that I might not be suitable for such an intimate friendship at that moment and thought that perhaps I should distance myself from him. It seemed unfair to put him through my craziness without him being at fault, and I doubted my ability to maintain control. I invited him over one night to explain, and I was a mess when he arrived. He saw that I was struggling and said, "I value our friendship really, really highly. I like how close we are. I want us to stay close friends. I want to be friends not only when you are at your best but also when you are at your worst." I expressed that trusting him and feeling secure in our relationship was difficult for me. He responded, "Then we will take it one step at a time and build that trust." I wish I could say that after his reassuring words, I suddenly felt secure in our friendship and everything was fine. However, that was not the case. The following months were a nightmare and all of it was my doing. I experienced near-daily breakdowns, lashed out at him, and doubted everything he said and did. I cannot imagine how exhausting it must have been for him to deal with me on a daily basis, yet he remained calm and steadfast. He reassured me time and again. Whenever I suggested that if he did certain things, it would alleviate some of my fear, he attempted to accommodate my requests. However, I always concluded such requests with, "Sorry, you do not have to do it," because I was terrified that this time he might get angry with me. He would invariably respond, "You do not have to apologize. I would not do it if I did not want to." I did not make it easy for him. I was quite toxic most of the time. I think I was trying to push him away before he could leave me first. I awaited the inevitable fallout. Why had he not left yet? Did I truly deserve all the trouble I was putting him through? He had other friends who were mentally stable and not exhausting him every day. I asked him, "Wouldn't it be easier for you to let go?" He simply replied, "It is far more painful for me that way. And for you." After another breakdown, I asked him, "Are you angry?" He responded, "I am not angry. I am just tired and sad. You are jumping from extremes to extremes. I just want you to be stable and safe. I have seen glimpses of you being happy, comfortable, and dare I say safe, but then it slips back into sadness and anxiety. It hurts." The more he shared such sentiments, the more I fell for him. I could not help myself because I had never encountered someone who saw the worst of me and said, "I am even more certain of you now. Thus, if you are attempting to make me reconsider our friendship, it will not work. I am not going anywhere." Eventually, I confessed my feelings for him, and he replied, "My feelings for you will always be platonic." He then asked for an hour to gather his thoughts for a more proper response. That night, I went to bed early, utterly devastated, despite having anticipated his response. An hour later, my phone buzzed continuously with his messages. The next morning, I discovered lengthy messages filled with his thoughts. Even though it was not the response I had hoped for, especially from someone as stoic as him who rarely opens up, I recognized how much it meant that I was one of the few individuals privileged enough to see this side of him. He expressed how much he cared for me and that he was committed to ensuring I felt safe and secure in our friendship. However, he reiterated that he could never provide the romantic love I desired. He accepted that I was in love with him and expressed his willingness to manage that until the day I finally moved on from those feelings, recognizing that our relationship would be platonic. Nonetheless, in his messages, he deliberately avoided using the term love. Even while stating how much I meant to him and how much he cared for me, he refrained from employing that word. After receiving such a clear and firm rejection, my heart stubbornly refused to relent. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself that he would not love me in that way, I found it impossible. I often reflected on everything he said and did, wondering how it could all be considered strictly platonic, particularly given the relatively short time we had known each other, less than 2 years. I thought about his reactions whenever V's name was mentioned, which often resulted in a physical response of distaste. He grimaced as though he could not bear to hear me mention him and expressed disdain when I spoke ill of V, often appearing pleased. He once told me I do not even want to be in the same space as him. On one occasion, while walking through the park, I brought up something regarding V that happened in class, and he abruptly stopped in his tracks, his demeanor shifting. What happened? He asked with a rigid expression. I was momentarily taken aback by his reaction and questioned why he had halted. You are going to tell me what happened now, or I am not moving, he insisted with forced levity, though I could see he was wrestling with something inside. I replied that it seemed V was going through a tough time, which seemed to soothe him slightly as he said, well, that's unfortunate, but it's not your problem. We resumed walking afterward. Another remarkable aspect was how he could read me like a book. It is uncanny how he could simply look at me and immediately discern my emotional state, sometimes even through text messages. It often felt as though I could never conceal my feelings from him because he just knew. He would reassure me without me needing to ask if he sensed my anxiety about something. He once said, even if we are not in constant communication, my love for you will not cease. That was the first instance in which he used the word love out loud. I understood he meant it in a platonic sense, but still, my heart clung to that word, and many insecurities I had regarding our relationship began to diminish. Additionally, he genuinely liked my hair. I had previously cut it very short, and when I started letting it grow, he stumbled over his words, saying, maybe you should let your hair grow instead of cutting it, it's really nice and curly. I decided to let it grow, and I was pleased with how it turned out. If I ever mentioned trimming it, he would utter, it would be so strange if you cut your hair short again. Long hair suits you far better. From his tone, it was clear he did not want me to shorten my hair. Typically, he steered clear of complimenting my looks, yet occasionally he would momentarily forget himself and become somewhat effusive, remarking, you have really nice hair, or I like your beard and a stubbled look. It really suits you, before awkwardly going quiet and avoiding eye contact. Fast forward to the night when I finally resolved to move on from my feelings for him. My friend had a habit of overcompensating for any minor upsets he caused me. For instance, while we were working on a project side by side, my leg brushed against his. He remarked, why are you making physical contact? I shifted my leg, asking if it bothered him. He replied, no, but right now it's distracting me from focusing on the project. That night when he came to my place for our movie night, he leaned heavily against me as if to atone for his earlier reaction. During that evening, we began discussing his emotional vulnerability, and I noted that he opened up very slowly. He countersued that he had never opened up to anyone as he had to me. We delved into how I became jealous whenever I heard of other men flirting with or hitting on him. He recounted incidents of friends from his hometown who would sit on his lap during bench presses at the gym or who had seen him naked in the gym showers. Although these occurrences predated our acquaintance and were quite innocuous, I felt a familiar sting. I inquired about the friend he had previously cited having a crush on and whether he still harbored feelings for him. He answered, what I consider to be feelings is far weaker than what you consider to be feelings. I pressed on, asking if he would pursue a relationship with this friend if given the chance. He responded, do you want the truth? I affirmed that I did, and he said, we would be friends with benefits. I felt as though a knife had pierced my heart, and I knew he could see my distress. I asked, how about a relationship? And he simply stated no. I reminded him that he had previously told me he would never pursue anything romantic with me, yet now he was suggesting he would with that friend. He asserted, it's not the same. Would you be happy with hookups? I replied, no, I do not believe you would be. He explained to me that I was a romantic and that it was a fundamental aspect of my character, whereas he was not. I do not think about domestic life or growing old together. I am only 23. I want to explore more. I do not know what I want. He added those friends would not care if I told them about flirting with other people because there are no feelings involved. They would just laugh. We attempted to return our focus to the show, but he noticed my visible distress and I was clearly hurting. He asked, do you want me to leave so you can process everything I have said? I fell silent and he said, perhaps this will help you stop being in love with me, turning our relationship platonic. I replied, you told me definitively that you would never feel anything for me. He explained, when we first met, I considered having a casual sexual relationship with you, but then I got to know you better. I have definitively decided that I do not want to engage in any sexual relationship with you. Pursuing hookups with someone who desires true love is a recipe for disaster. I recalled his previous claim that he had never felt any spark between us or considered anything with me. I asked, are you saying this to make me feel better? He replied, no, it is true. I pressed further, why did you consider that if I am not your type? He went quiet, then said, you are my emotional type. That is why we are such good friends. I insisted, you are mistaken about yourself. You are correct about most things, but not about this. He smiled, that is too bad. I take pleasure in being right. I told him, the way you have persistently stuck by me despite everything, the manner in which you stubbornly refuse to give up on me is romantic. It is not solely about growing old together. He hesitated, which was the first time I saw him falter in his confidence regarding his perspective. Quietly, he remarked, you think romance is about domestic life and aging together. I replied, that is the ultimate goal, yes, but that is not my definition of romance. He remained silent. I asked, what is your ambition then? And anticipated he would reference his career aspirations. Instead, he said, if I tell you, we will never discuss this again. I agreed, and he added, I merely want evenings where I do not wish to end it all. That troubled me profoundly. Under the emotional weight of our conversation, I finally broke down in tears. He urged me, no, no. Do not do that, I would never do it. I always viewed him as a mature, composed individual, so discovering that he concealed pain behind that stoicism was shocking. I realized I was the sole person he had confided this to. After a lengthy period of silence, he finally packed his things. We stood in front of my door where I said, you will change, my instincts about people are seldom wrong, you will change. He countered, do not give yourself false hope. I expressed my anger towards him for disclosing information about that friend, feeling a strong urge to punch him. He chuckled softly, stating, most people in your situation would not reveal that. Nevertheless, I appreciate your honesty. I replied, yes, now you can leave. He smiled and leaned against the fridge, saying, we are stuck in this emotional limbo because both of us are too stubborn to relent. I remained silent, and he added, but we share a bond. I do not believe it will ever fade. I agreed. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door, and for a fleeting moment I sensed that he might lean in for a kiss. However, he simply said, it has been a long day. Rest. I do not believe there is any possibility of him ever loving me in the way I desire. My current goal is to move on from these feelings while maintaining our connection, as creating distance would harm both of us. However, I feel uncertain about how to achieve that. In summary, I am in love with my best friend. We are both male, I am gay, and he is bisexual. He has supported me through some incredibly challenging times in my life, even when I was extremely difficult to be around, and he refused to abandon me. I confessed my feelings, and he reciprocated with care, but not in the same way. Now I want to move on from my feelings without having to distance myself from him. Story 2. In my wild ride with a narcissist, I learned that love can feel like emotional quicksand. She gaslit me into believing you have to pay the price, and manipulated even the smallest gestures, like dumping too much dulce de leche on pancakes. After I finally broke free, her mother guilt-tripped me, saying she wanted a life with you. Now I'm clean and rebuilding my life, but I often wonder what was her endgame. So here is my wild ride with someone who had more red flags than a Soviet parade. We met in person while she was visiting my country. Initially, she was sweet, intense, and fixated on the idea that we were soulmates. She even cried when we parted ways for the first time, swore we would build a life together, and began writing me letters. When she flew back home, I started therapy to try to make the long-distance relationship work. Spoiler alert, it was anything but successful. At the beginning, she would call me constantly, like all day, every day. I remember she would often send messages with zero context, saying things like, I am scared of losing you. She even once sent me a video showing all the alarms she set to talk to me because of the time difference. She never used a single one of them. Not once did she message me at those times. Then, a few months into the relationship, she never had time to talk on the phone. I kept asking if we could communicate more by phone instead of texting all the time, and she always claimed she could not. Yet, magically, whenever she was upset about some random thing, she had all the time in the world to call and yell. She frequently did things I never requested, but when I asked for something basic, something completely unrelated to trust, she would explode. One time she spent the night at her grandmother's house, and I asked to see a photo of the house just to get to know her family better. She turned it into a massive fight about how I did not trust her. I simply did not want to talk on the phone due to her reaction. She pretended to be concerned about me, but the moment I replied with a message explaining why I disliked it, she twisted my words, changed their meaning, and flipped the situation around again, making me feel as though I was the one who had done something wrong. That was the kind of position she consistently kept me in. Even when she was clearly in the wrong, she would manipulate my feelings and somehow make me feel guilty. She used to guilt-trip me during arguments by saying her credit card was maxed out because she bought the tickets to come see me and brought gifts for my family. However, at other times, she would provide proof that she respected me and wanted to reassure me, even though I had not asked for it. But then, in other situations, her behavior was completely contradictory. Her actions were filled with contradictions like that. She would become hostile over the simplest matters. At one point, I discovered she was renting a studio near her job because she did not like taking the bus. When I remarked that it was odd she had never mentioned it, she accused me of saying she was hiding things. That kind of overreaction was routine. Eventually, she returned and lived with me for a few weeks. That is when things became unhinged. She cried about everything, complained constantly, and threw a full-blown 2 a.m. tantrum because I wanted to smoke a cigarette before going to sleep after we returned from the movies. The situation concluded with her dropping her promise ring on the table like it was a telenovela finale and calling her mother, crying. One afternoon, she became upset because I said it was not that I did not want to go out, but that I was fine with doing something else. She began making a scene and throwing a tantrum, which ended with her using her phone and threatening me that she would arrange outings by herself and I would stay home. She was constantly establishing boundaries in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. I remember when we first met, I used to playfully tease her by touching her nose with my tongue and she would laugh, but when she returned this time, she would not let me do it anymore. Small things like that kept occurring, tiny rules, little restrictions. It was as though she constantly needed to assert power in the relationship. Then I realized that these details had been apparent from the first time I met her when she was 100% perfect and showed me only the good side of herself. On our first date, she kissed me on the ear, but when I wanted to reciprocate, she would say, no, no. I later understood that this was a small hint of how she always attempted to exercise control, even in the smallest details. And of course, she also used sex as a weapon. One afternoon, we were outside, and she said she wanted to buy gifts for her family, and I ended up being the one who purchased them. The money she brought, she spent it entirely on herself that day and every day after. She displayed contradictory behaviors consistently. When she visited, she was taking pills to avoid getting pregnant. One day after we had sex, she asked me to buy the morning after pill just in case. However, 3 days later, she told me she wanted a baby and wanted to have one immediately. Another amusing detail is that we had already discussed it, and she did not want to allow me to choose a name for our future children. She had already decided what they would be called. I expressed that I would like to think about the names, and her excuse was, but you do not know what names yet. Anytime we had an argument or I did something she did not like, and I still wanted to discuss it, she would hit me with her favorite revenge line, you have to pay the price. One morning I made her breakfast, as usual, and accidentally dumped an excessive amount of dulce de leche milk caramel on her pancakes. When I offered to scrape off the extra, she looked me dead in the eye and said, no, now you have to eat it. Then she watched me shovel spoonfuls of that saccharine nightmare into my mouth, whispering, eat it. Sweet punishment indeed. I swear this happened. One time I was merely laughing at something unrelated while we were going to sleep, and she turned to me and screamed, shut up and sleep. Other peculiar and amusing details include: I remember once she told me about someone she met when she was younger who was like a father figure to her. One day, we were returning to the apartment when she showed me her phone and said, this is the app I have to use to talk to him, but I do not use it because I have to log in every time. And I was just thinking to myself, what the heck? Also, there were superficial comments like, you do not know what it is like to have an Instagram account with 25,000 followers. On her main account, she only posted highlights of me until one day that highlight slid all the way to the end of the row. She said, it moved by itself, I did not do anything. I did not like it, and she used that as an excuse to create a new account where she exclusively posted about me. Then she deleted all traces of me from the main account. That was a significant issue in our relationship. Her excuse. I have a whole account just for you, as if that made up for erasing me from everywhere else. The breakup. I do not know why, but the last time I said goodbye to her at the airport, she was crying again. Something inside me made me feel like it was the last time I would see her, and it indeed was. This happened 2 weeks after the last time I said goodbye to her in person. She had this habit of threatening to message my mother whenever she wanted to take a break. Finally, during one argument, she actually did it, messaging my mother and saying we needed time apart. So I told her, fine, take your time. Then she became angry and said, I do not want to stop talking. The following Saturday, she disappeared all day. When I inquired why, she accused me of bringing things up again and claimed she did want to take that break, the same one she had told me she did not want to take. A few days before that Saturday, I had commented on a photo on her main Instagram account. She became angry and told me, I am not a tree for you to urinate on like a dog. Soon after, I discovered some random guy's account someone she followed where his biography was clearly dedicated to her. That was the disagreement that ended our relationship. As always, she denied everything. The next day, we broke up. The aftermath. After we ended things, her mother messaged me on WhatsApp with dramatic guilt trips like, you destroyed the relationship because you did not trust her. She wanted a life with you, someday you will realize that. We will have to tell Grandma since she has seen you as part of the family. Honestly, I felt like I had accidentally joined a cult. While we were living together, she told me she could not afford to travel back in December. Yet exactly 1 month after we broke up in December, a friend informed me she was vacationing with some random older man, her brand new husband. Now I was not perfect. I was battling alcohol and drug addiction, and I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and borderline personality disorder, all under treatment now. But every single conflict became an excuse for her to weaponize my mental health. I even took your borderline personality disorder into account, she once said, as if that made her a saint. She would say things like, I have always been perfect in this relationship. After she ghosted me, I hit rock bottom. This entire situation caused me a lot of cognitive dissonance, and my addiction issues escalated. The last time I spoke to her after she had ghosted me was via email. I wrote to her earnestly about my feelings, and the last response I received from her was, if you say so, the show must go on. Strangely, she sent me a letter the first time she returned to her country, and the mail service in my country informed me over the phone that the letter was lost because I was not home when it arrived. Exactly the morning after we broke up, the letter arrived at my house again. It seemed like some cosmic dark humor coincidence. You know what is wild? I could go on. There are countless things I am not even mentioning. This story has chapters, spin-offs, and probably a deleted scene or two. Still, if you are reading this and find yourself in a situation that feels eerily familiar, someone constantly making you feel guilty, flipping things onto you, acting like a victim while controlling everything, that is not love. That is emotional quicksand disguised with a pretty smile. Since then, I have completely transformed my life. I am clean and receiving treatment for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and borderline personality disorder. I have forgiven myself. I have let go. And every day I feel a bit more like myself. I am a programmer, but sometimes I take freelance jobs. Economic stability has never been a part of my life, so I have always lived paycheck to paycheck. I am from Argentina, where everything is expensive. When I met her, I was fortunate enough to secure some work, some of which was not programming. I worked as a stagehand for a well-known rock band as a warehouse manager and was also developing a website all at the same time. I invested all the money I earned into the relationship, including paying for rent when she came to visit. However, I also ended up spending the money on alcohol and drugs throughout my life, I mean. These days, I have minimal work, but for the first time in my life, I bought my brother a gift for his last birthday. Seeing his surprised smile made me feel it was the best money I have ever spent. And if you are also dealing with mental health struggles, addictions, or simply attempting to rebuild after a mess, trust me, you can. I realized something beautiful. What you give is what matters most. The results are not always relevant. Who we are is the most important thing. To this day, I have no idea what her endgame was. The letters, the promises, the rings, the drama, and I do not care. But I know for certain that this situation led me to put an end to my issues with alcohol and drug addiction. She accidentally saved me. Some people do not want love, they want drama. I kept only the lessons. If something feels off in your relationship, trust your instincts. Especially if her mother is screaming at you in a language you do not understand. Story 3. My life is a web of lies. I've been lying since I could remember, and my family doesn't understand mental illness. At 22, I'm financially broke and emotionally wrecked, trying to unlearn my survival tactics while feeling utterly alone. Can I finally breathe? Firstly, I apologize for the lengthy post, but I felt the need to write this down. I am 22 years old, and recently a man I began seeing made me realize something I had been avoiding for a long time. I am a pathological liar. It all began when he asked me questions, personal, uncomfortable ones, and I panicked. I responded without thinking, saying the most absurd things merely to avoid the discomfort. He is an intelligent man. The following day, he informed me that he knew I was lying. He did not become angry. He simply expressed that he wanted me to be truthful, to tell him everything when we met again, but I understood that he sensed I was deceiving him to gain something from him. I drove home that day feeling like it was one of the worst days of my life. I could barely catch my breath. That night, I comprehended the full gravity of the situation. I have been lying to everyone I know. Small lies, big lies, lies that became so normalized I could not even realize they were lies anymore. I had a vague awareness before, but that night it struck me that the lies had taken control of my life. They had become my reality. As soon as I realized this might be pathological lying, I texted my best friend to confide in her. I needed to escape. I was born into a world where appearances did not match reality. Externally, I seemed like a girl from privilege, a wealthy family, elite schools, a life abroad. However, the truth was messier. I was emotionally neglected by my family. I was not physically abandoned, but I felt unseen, untouched, and unacknowledged. I was never taught basic human emotions. I was not nurtured or loved. I endured experiences that caused significant trauma, such as being unable to demonstrate or receive affection, feeling uncomfortable with the slightest bodily contact, and having limited memories of my childhood. I had to speculate about what it meant to care or to be cared for. Our home was overcrowded, leaving me with no space to breathe. I studied under the harshest conditions, often hungry and surviving on classmates' shared lunches. I was the emotional outlet for my mother, who projected her feelings of sadness and anger onto me, and I also experienced mental abuse from my father, to the extent that I do not even remember how he looks, smells, or speaks. No one ever inquired about my well-being. The silence at home was deafening. Sometimes I wished I could simply vanish. I believe I began lying before I even understood what lying meant at a very young age. I learned early on that telling the truth did not bring me comfort or safety. It only led to punishment, judgment, or nothing at all. Thus, I started distorting reality not to deceive but to safeguard myself, to survive. I lied because the truth of my life was too painful to articulate. My mother and brothers treated me as though I did not belong, so I fabricated a story that they were not truly my family, that my mother was my stepmother, and that my father had me with another woman. It was not true, but I needed it to be. It was the only way to rationalize why they treated me like trash. Lying became a reflex. I deceived others to appear stronger, more interesting, and less broken. It became my coping strategy. I told people I had lived in places I had not and spoke languages I did not know, but the strange part is I later actually lived in those places and learned those languages. Nonetheless, the lies were not about manipulation. I was not trying to gain anything from anyone. It was about survival. It was my panic response, and I did not even comprehend why I was lying. I simply did it. Sometimes I lie before I even realize it. It is like muscle memory. My brain defaults to lying when it perceives judgment, shame, or fear, especially when I fear losing someone or being exposed, or sometimes for no apparent reason. The truth is, I do not know what love is supposed to feel like. I was not taught empathy. I was treated as though I did not matter, as if I were in the way. No one ever told me I was sacred. No one ever made me feel worthy. I am not proud of the things I have done, the lies I have told, or the people I have hurt. However, I did not do it to be cruel. I did it because I did not know how else to exist. I did not know what was true and what was not. Reality lost its place in my mind to the point where I just did not know anymore. Since coming to this realization, I have been attempting to change. I have told some individuals the truth. I have begun researching, reading, and studying this behavior. There have been instances when I catch myself mid-lie and stop or change direction. I thought I was making progress, but I am still lying to those around me. Each time I do, I feel a weight in my chest like a stone. I want to stop and tell the truth, but I freeze. I feel ashamed. I do not know how. I have been financially and emotionally independent since high school. My family did not support me then or even before, and they do not now. I have managed to survive, but I am exhausted. I feel completely alone and tired. Whenever I speak with my family, they make me feel even worse. Sometimes they say nice things, but most of the time it is just emotional abuse. I want to comfort them by telling them how they have ruined my life, how I was mentally unwell as a child and even worse now, and that I have had enough and do not want them in my life anymore. However, I am sure they would not even understand or acknowledge the harm they have caused, and who I am now is partly their fault. I do not think they are capable of understanding mental illness, and they would merely blame me for everything as they have throughout my life, claiming that I just want attention. I was never able to argue with my mother and older brother because I could not stop crying whenever I tried to defend myself, and they always yelled at me for that, assuming I was lying for attention and trying to escape the conversation. I hated the fact that I could never contain my tears when speaking to them. Now I realize how deeply fractured I am. I have brought myself this far, but I am running on empty. I feel drained being all alone without support or rest. My bank account holds only 37, and I must survive on it until the end of this month when I receive my monthly allowance, which is approximately 400, even less than half of the monthly minimum wage here. I am over 500 in credit card debt, and that is all I have to survive. I have no inheritance from my late father, no help from my family, and no savings. I am only allowed to remain in this country until the end of this year, but I wish to stay longer. I do not have anyone or anywhere to go after this. I cannot return to my home country because it is no longer safe. I belong to an ethnically marginalized group and have always faced bullying and racism in the country where I was born. I have never been culturally accepted, and now the economy is deteriorating, the government has turned into a dictatorship, and they are imprisoning people indiscriminately. I would hate to go back, and even if I did, I have no home to return to. Everyone thinks I am doing fine, but I am not. I am emotionally shattered and financially drowning. I just want to stop lying. I want to breathe. I want to organize my life. I want to stay here. I want to find a way to earn enough money to survive, to live without starving, without shame. I want to finally cease carrying the burden of all these lies. I keep blaming myself and questioning why this happened to me, why I am so alone, why I cannot stop comparing myself to people with stable lives and loving families. I have spent so long pretending to be strong that I have forgotten how vulnerable I truly am, and it is tearing me apart inside. I just want to escape, to break free from this prison I have constructed in my mind, to escape this miserable situation. But I do not know how, and that is the part that frightens me the most.